Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson on redundancy. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts, grade grade 7. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of redundancy. All right. So we said our chapter is redundancy. Our subject is English language arts, grade 7. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of redundancy is to remove redundant words and phrases, or redundant words or phrases. All right, so when it comes to redundant words, redundancy, redundant words and phrases, right? Then it means that redundant words and phrases needlessly repeat information that is given elsewhere in the sentence. All right, so we said redundant words and phrases, right? They repeat information that is given elsewhere within the sentence. And when it comes to redundant words or phrases, right, that they basically repeat information that is given elsewhere within the sentence. But when it comes to repetition, repeating words and unnecessary repetitions, they create either like a wordy, unpolished finish. So we see that redundant words and phrases, right? They repeat information that is given elsewhere within a sentence. And then when it comes to as much as redundant words or phrases, they repeat information that is given elsewhere. But unnecessary repetition, it creates the repetition, sorry. Unnecessary repetition of repeating certain words or phrases, right? That then creates a wordy, unpolished sentence. So when it comes to redundant words, right, and repeating certain information, remember we said that unnecessary repetition, right, creates either a lengthy, wordy type of sentence that is unpolished. And if we remove certain redundant words or phrases within a sentence, then it can improve your writing. All right, so if we look at an example or an activity or something, a mini activity, slash example on redundancy, right? Where words or phrases they repeat information and then it's given elsewhere within the sentence. So it says the monuments that we visited in Washington, D.C. were huge, right? We're describing the monument were huge and giant. So the monuments that we visited in Washington, D.C. were huge and giant. So when it comes to the specific sentence, right, here they're saying that huge and giant is basically the same thing. It's a synonym, right? Because it's got similar meaning. Because if we were to find the antonym of either one of those words, then we would either say small or little, right? But huge and giant, they basically imply that you're the same age. And also, and giant is redundant and should be removed from the sentence. So giant is redundant and should be removed from the sentence. So we see that we basically repeated. Remember, we said redundant words and phrases needlessly, they repeat information, right, that is given either elsewhere within the sentence. And we made an example of huge and giant. And huge and giant, right, it's basically is similar. Because if you were to ask what is the opposite, the antonym of small, we would either say big or we say huge or would we say giant, right? All right. So we said we have words like huge and giant that are synonyms and they basically imply the very same thing. So which means that giant is in redundant, right? And it should be removed from the sentence. So now it basically just means that instead of saying huge and giant, we are just going to say huge. The monuments that we visited in Washington, D.C. were huge. All right, if we look at another example, right, it says last month, Julie and Alex collaborated together on a project for the Lost marketing team. So last month, Julie and Alex collaborated together on a project for the marketing team. And in this case, right, if we look at the word collaborated, so the word collaborated already means or it implies that, you know, it is together. All right. And before we continue, redundant words and phrases repeat information, and unnecessary repetitions, they create wordy and polished sentences. And in order for us to remove redundant words or phrases, that can then surely improve your writing or our writing. And we made an example, two examples actually, where the one says the monuments that we visited in DC were huge and giant. Giant is an exaggerated word. All right. So we removed the word huge, which is redundant, and we only left the word with we remove giant, and we are only left with the word which is basically huge. And then the same with the second one where we said last month Julie and Alex collaborated together on a project for marketing team. And before I even go on to the next one, collaborate means to be together or to stick together. All right. So since the word collab and together, it already, let's say, implies that they're together, right? Which means that the word together is or should be redundant and should be removed from the sentence. All right, so now we're going to A plus students.ca where we are going to remove redundant words and phrases or of all phrases. And our chapter is redundancy. And the lessons that we are focusing on is to remove redundant words or phrases. All right, so now we're going on to a lesson where we're going to remove redundant words or phrases. All right, so we see that when it comes to redundant, right, then words and phrases, right, they repeat information that is given elsewhere in the sentence, right? So unnecessary repetitions, they create either something that is called worthy and polished sentences, right? And in order for us to remove, right, so removing redundant words and phrases can improve our writing. All right. Then it says the huge monument that we visited in Washington, D.C. were huge and giant. So huge and giant, they imply the same thing because it's a synonym. And then we have giant, which is a redundant and should be removed from the last sentence. All right. So here it says that we say that huge and giant are. Mhm. Huge and giant is basically the same because if we look at the synonyms of huge or the synonym of giant, it will be the same, right? Which means that giant, since we are going to be removing giant, it is a reductant and should be removed from the sentence. Yes, yes, last month, Chile and Alex collaborated together on a project for the marketing team. The word collaborate already implies together, so the word together is redundant and should be removed from the sentence. So now it's like they are removing unnecessary words and unnecessary things. Like for example, together is the same as collab, so which means that collaborated is in the word to use instead of writing together again. The same with right now or currently, it is the same words. All right. So where we say the next one says right now and currently are redundant, right? So we're gonna look at that sentence now, as to why we say right now and currently are redundant. All right. It says spectators and players are not currently allowed to enter the sports arena. Spectators and players are not currently allowed to enter the arena right now. So right now. All right, so now they're not even giving us an activity, like an actual activity, like here. It only says select a word and phrase that is redundant and can be removed without changing the meaning of the text. And here, if we look at our sentence over here, the first sentence already says that spectators and players shouldn't be allowed on the sports ground. And then the next one says they shouldn't be allowed on the sports ground right now. All right. It says the Historical Society lecture was brief but full of interesting information. The Historical Society lecture was brief in duration but full of interesting information. All right. So even if you look at the next one, right, it says we need to select the word or phrase that is redundant and can be removed without changing the meaning of the word. If we look here at it says in historical society, lecture was but full of interesting information. All right. So here it says, right, that the historical society lecture was brief but full of interesting information. And when we say it was brief, then we're talking about time, and that is why in the second one they're showing in duration, but full of interesting information. Right now, in duration, but full of interesting information. All right, let's go to our test. All right, so we said we need to select the word or phrase that is redundant, which means that it can be removed without changing the meaning of the text. It says the Historical Society lecture was brief. So here we say the Historical Society lecture was brief in duration, or do we say of interesting? So we can say in duration because we're talking about the time. Yes, so well done. The first option is correct because we're talking about time if we're talking about duration, right? It says the twins are a pair of actors who recently appeared in a documentary about personality differences among siblings. So, do we say a pair of or do we say differences? So, do we say a pair of or do you say differences? So, the twins are a pair of, right? Because a pair of is the same as almost saying twins, because twins is two, a pair is two, right? They're saying we need to select the word or phrase that is redundant, that is repeated. It's almost like a repetitive word and can be removed without changing the meaning of the text. It says the two actresses were mortified when they arrived at the event wearing the same identical ball gowns, or do we say the actors were mortified when they arrived at the event wearing the same identical ball gowns? The word identical or the word wearing, which one is redundant? All right, so if we were to choose the correct one, then yes, we will choose option two because the same is the same as identical. Yeah, well done. It says the committee has decided to postpone the instructor training workshop until later, or the committee has decided to postpone the instructor training workshop until later. We need to choose the correct redundant. And the next one we said the committee has decided to postpone the instructor training workshop. Do we say until later or the instructor? Which one is correct? Until later. All right, and if we were to choose the correct one, let's choose until later. Yes, because until later is the same as postponing. Remember, if you postpone something, it means that, look here, I won't be able to do it now, but maybe end of the month or next month. So, which means that it's like saying not now, right? So, which means that even if we were to remove that word, the the race still would have continued. So, to learn astrophysics, you should start with the basic fundamentals. So, when it comes to we need to select the word or phrase that is redundant. It's like a repetitive word. It says to learn astrophysics, you should start with the basic fundamentals. So we need to choose either basic or you should. All right. So if we were to look at the word that is redundant to the word that is next to it, then I think yes, option one is it basics the same as saying the fundamentals? Yes. Yeah. So basics is then the same as the fundamentals. Yes. Patrick and Alexa are collaborating together on a cover of John Lennon's song Imagine. So the is it together or imagine? Option one for together or option two for imagine. All right. So we will then choose the together. Remember we said that collab is the same as together, right? So we'll stick with together, which is option one. Yes. Are you saying that once again together? Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. It says low introductory home loan rates usually revert back to standard interest rates after the annual period is complete. Or we can say option two, it is reverted back to standard interest rates after their. All right, so we said once again, low introductory home loan rates usually revert back to standard interest rates after the annual period is back. So we'll go with, let's see, is it option one? Ah, it's actually option two, which is back. Yes, I didn't even see your option, but back is correct. Yes, so the sentence on its own without the word back is still the same. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's look at the next one. Several hikers gathered to watch as the peregrine falcon soared and flew through the skies. So we need to say which one is, we need to remove the redundant words, right? Once again, a redundant word is a almost like a repetitive word. So even if you were to remove that word from the sentence would still make this, will still make sense, right? Or the sentence will still basically be the same. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think it's my eyes. I think it's my eyes since it's like just before 2 in the morning. But the initial, thank you very much. And I've been trying to think, am I reading it correctly? But yeah, thank you for the correcting for the initial period. So several hikers gathered to watch as the peregrine falcon soared and flew through the sky. Which word is our redundant word that we can remove without changing the meaning to the text? Is it and flew or is it gathered? Yes. So we will then choose option one. Well done. Because option one, flew and soar is the same, right? Because they'll say like soared is like to fly, especially to go, you know, up. And that is also the same as flew or fly. Well done. Let's look at the next one. It says the speedometer in my grandfather's old truck is quite small in size. So it's hard. I think this is to decipher the number. So the speedometer in my grandfather's old truck is quite small in size. So it's hard to I think this word is to decipher the numbers, because if you look at the numbers, right? If they're talking about, let's say, a speedometer, they're talking about numbers, and then decipher means basically it's like almost like you're converting, coding, that type of thing. Wow, thank you. Thank you. All right, so which word is correct? Is it option one or option two? All right, so if we were to choose the correct one, we will choose option two, which is in size, because that can also be the same as saying the truck is quite small. So if we are saying quite small, then we don't have to still say in size. So even if we were to remove in size, and then our sentence will still make sense. All right, that is correct. So now we go. Okay, so that is not the end of our lesson on redundancy. We see the redundancy, it is words that are repetitive, right? And within a sentence, right? Let's say, for example, we have a word that is maybe similar or that is repeated, but it means the same as the other word. Then, even if we were to remove our redundant word or phrase, right? If we were to remove the redundant word or phrase and the sentence still makes sense, then you know like I said, then that is a redundant word. So let's say basically if we were to remove a word or phrase that has been repeated and our sentence makes the same, then that is a redundant word. Because redundancy, it is like when you are repeating certain words, right? Within a sentence, and sometimes repeating words within sentences, right? It can basically change sentences, make a sentence to not flow properly, right? So even if we were to remove a certain word, right, then it will basically show it being a redundant if it is the sentence still makes the same with even after we have removed the specific word. All right, but this is now the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 7, for joining the class. Thanks for the correction. I appreciate it. I really hope that you guys are going to have a good evening further. All right. Goodbye. And you're welcome. And thank you for bringing your smartness as always. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the correction also. So have a good evening further. Goodbye.